I think following your dreams, following your gut, it's worked really, really well for me, and I don't mind disrupting if it's for the right reason. And so I have a philosophy, I always say, do the right thing, do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, then you can disrupt. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
Welcome back to Innovate or Evaporate. I'm your host, Toph Day. What do a coffee shop, flight school, one of the world's largest audio retailers, and a car dealership have in common? Chuck Surack. Today we have the privilege of interviewing Chuck, the visionary founder of Sweetwater, a leading retailer of musical instruments and professional audio equipment. Chuck's story is an inspiring tale of passion, perseverance, and entrepreneurial spirit. What started as a mobile recording studio in the back of a VW bus has grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that serves musicians and audio professionals around the world. His unwavering commitment to understanding the customer and deep understanding of the music industry have been instrumental to Sweetwater's success. Let's dive into this incredible journey. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Toph. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I don't even know where to start. There's so many exciting things that you've done. You're like a modern-day Iron Man.
Oh, I appreciate that. You know, really, to me, it's pretty simple. Just one foot in front of the other and making every day a little bit better than the day before.
I love that.
Yeah.
So back in the day, so when you first got passionate about music, are you a musician?
I am a musician. I play saxophone and keyboards, and actually I play about everything except guitar. And yet, if I fast forward, we sell 1,000 guitars a day. I can play the chords, but I really can't play guitar.
That's impressive. I played the trumpet.
There you go. I play trumpet, I play
counts.
trombone, play drums, bass, but not guitar.
I tried to learn the guitar and I gave up.
Yeah, that's where I am.
I just couldn't get it figured out. So you're a musician. And so how old were you when you started flirting with the idea of starting a business? Because you had a VW bus, and were you playing in a band or anything?
I was, but actually for me, it started before that. And it was before the word entrepreneurship had even been invented. But
So what year is this roughly?
I don't know, I was 5 years old. 5 years old, and I started making pot holders where you put the loops in the frame and then go back and forth. And I grew up in a little town in southern Ohio, and I was selling those pot holders for 15 cents a piece or 2 for a quarter. And my little town of 5,000 people got more than 10,000 pot holders over a couple years.
That's amazing. And
then I had a paper out. Most of my friends had 40 or 50 papers. I figured out if I went to apartment complexes and senior citizen homes, they were closer together, and I was delivering 330 papers every day. And
your margin increases.
My margin increased. And then my parents moved to Fort Wayne when I was 13. And then I started building bicycles. I would go to the police auctions in Fort Wayne and buy the beat-up bikes, and I'd take 3 and make 1. And when I became 15, I worked at Sears and managed the toy department, and I was Winnie the Pooh at Christmas time. But my musical career really started at age 10, 5th grade. Most kids at that time played a music instrument, and I wanted to play trombone. And my dad said, you don't want to play trombone, you want to play saxophone, because saxophones get all the solos. Of course, at 10 years old, what are solos? I had no idea. But he was a frustrated accordion player, played through college, and I think he was living vicariously through me. If he really cared about me getting solos and getting girls, which is what it's all about, he'd have told me to play guitar, but he didn't do that.
Yeah.
Saxophone. And so I played music all the way through school, going down a dual path. I love children. I wanted to be a pediatrician. And so I took all the college prep classes of chemistry and Latin and all that. And I thought after high school, and lots of music, and after high school I thought I'd take a year off. Today we call that a gap year. It wasn't quite called that back then. But I went on the road as a musician, and for 5 years I never looked back, and I never went to college. But after being on the road for several years, I came home with what I had gathered on the road, which was a beat-up VW bus, a bunch of microphone cables, some recording equipment, and I started a mobile recording studio. So I would pull the bus alongside the church, the school, the nightclub. I'd run 100 feet or 200 feet of microphone cables. I'd mic up the band, the choir, the preacher, the company president, whatever it was. And I'd sit in the bus with my headphones and my reel-to-reel tape recorder in those days. And I would record the event of that evening. And then I would take it back to my very modest 12 by 55 mobile home, which is where I would edit the songs in the right order and then send away and make LPs and cassettes and that sort of thing. And that really was the genesis of Sweetwater, and that's how I started it. I did that for about 5 years.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And 1983, 84, I was invited to what's called the NAMM show, National Association of Music Merchants. A friend of mine in Fort Wayne was a piano organ dealer, and he said, you want to go to the NAMM show? I said, what is that? And he told me, and I said, yeah, I'll go with you. So we went to Chicago, and I saw a prototype of the first music instrument that played back digital recordings of other instruments. It was called the Kurzweil K250. It was invented by a man named Ray Kurzweil, who's a futurist a lot of people talk about today, but he was inspired by Stevie Wonder. Stevie had encouraged him to come up with a machine that had all the sounds of the orchestra, and Ray said, you can already buy one. And Stevie says, no, there's electric pianos, there's electric organs, but there's nothing that plays back a real recording of a 9-foot grand piano or a 50-voice choir or a 45-piece string section. And Ray went away with some MIT grads, and they put together a music instrument that was basically a bunch of computer memory. Now today we do this on our iPhones and iPads and all that, but to be able to sample in the mid-'80s was incredible. And I saw a prototype of that machine. I thought, wow, that is very cool. I could use that in my own recording studio. So I ended up buying serial number 32, brought it back to Fort Wayne, and I reverse engineered it, designed my own sounds, and it was just a lot of fun. And that's what really grew the company.
So then you that first thing you did after all the recording studio is you built a new digital recording device. Is that a fair way to say it?
Well, I had moved from that VW bus to a more traditional recording studio that had about probably the size of a 2-car garage or something. But when I bought that Kurzweil music instrument, it was 88 keys. It looked like a big piano, but it had computer memory in it. And so you could record your own sounds. And I eventually reverse engineered how it worked, designed my own software to go in it, and started getting calls from Stevie Wonder and Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton and Bob James and Lyle Mays, all these famous old artists. And they wanted my sounds. And so I would either send them to them or I would go install them in their machines. And I quickly got the reputation that I knew that machine pretty well. And then one day I got a call from one of my friends wanting to do computer music, or sheet music on the computer. And I said, well, I know how to do that. I'm doing that in my own studio. So I became a dealer for sheet music, and then the interfaces that go with the computer, and on and on and on. And it expanded to where we are today, 46 years later, and we have 2,800 employees. We're doing about $1.7 billion, $1.8 billion this year. It's been a fascinating story, fascinating ride.
It's an amazing ride. So this is what we call hard tech today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So the early version of that. So then when did you decide? So you started selling those devices along with the software to various artists?
Well, I started by selling the sounds first.
So you're selling the sounds.
If you remember back in the days, we called them semi-rigid 3.5-inch floppy disks that the Macintosh used.
Yep.
And the Macintosh in that day, the 128, the 512, the Mac Plus, those all used the same Motorola processor, a 68,000 processor that was used in the Kurzweil. And so it was really easy to move sounds back and forth since it was the same basic operating system. And I sold sounds first, and then eventually parts for their machine because it was a works in a drawer. You could pull it open, and you could put ROM chips in, and those ROM chips had sounds that were burned onto them.
Yep.
And then eventually I sold machines, and then eventually all the other accessories that went with it. So.
And were you selling this as a lump sum? So like I'm gonna sell you A, B, and C parts, components, sounds, whatever. They write a check for that thing, or did you start to flirt with these modern business models of like subscriptions or
No, there were no subscriptions back
Okay.
then. It was they could buy one or all of the various options and pieces that were available.
Yeah, and then you had a service contract then to
No,
help.
I would just sell them the
Just
pieces.
sell 'em.
Yep. Yeah.
That's wild. So then how'd you go from there? So are you traveling around the country at that time?
I was in the early days, yeah. A lot of those artists would pay me to fly to come put the latest software in their machine or
Right.
upgrade all the sounds or even teach them how to work it.
Yeah, the good old on-prem.
That's right. That's right.
So then how did you start to morph from, how long did you do that for? How long did that last?
Oh, from 84, 85 to about 89.
84, 89.
5 years ago or so.
So what was the kind of catalyst as the business started to morph then into third-party products? Or what was that next stepping stone?
So in 1989, I'm still operating out of my home and had a room in the basement where I could keep the equipment that I would send to my friends or deliver to my friends. But I finally said enough was enough because I had 5 employees that were coming in and out of my house every day. And so we found property actually and built our first little 5,000 square foot office in 1990. And then we just grew and grew from there. But it was helping my friends with their equipment. And it started with music software. Well, it started with the Kurzweil and then music software. And then they wanted recording equipment. And then they wanted some sound reinforcement equipment. And next thing you know, we support, probably 3,000 brands today, about 80,000 different products. But we went from 5,000 square feet, added on to 10,000, and then 20,000, and then 50,000. And finally, that wasn't enough. And so we had become landlocked where we were on the west side of Fort Wayne. So I started looking for a new location, which is where we are still today. 2006, we moved into a 40,000 square foot where I should stop. In 2006, we moved into a 40,000 square foot building, which was a combination of offices, and then we added a 35,000 square foot warehouse onto that. Fast forward to today, we have over 1 million square feet under roof, and we're on about 160 acres. And it's just been an unbelievable story.
Yeah, it's quite an amazing facility. I've been up there several times, as we mentioned before we started this podcast. And I think a couple of things that really struck me when I first walked into your business. One is learning that, at least with guitars, I think it is, that you test every product before you ship it.
Yeah, our concept is we want that out-of-box experience to be great when the customer opens it. And whether it's the guitars or even some of the other technology, we just want to make sure it's really the right product for the customer and it's going to be in great shape. You can imagine most guitars are handmade. And
yes.
So once in a while, Jim on Friday has a bad day, or Mary on Monday has a bad day, and we end up with some blemishes in the finish, or maybe the pickups aren't installed right. And so many years ago, we started the idea of a 55-point check on guitars. And a lot of the manufacturers got mad at me at first. Why are you doing this? I said, because it's not the quality that I would want to play. In
yes.
fact, I even heard in the early days, well, we just take the stuff you send back to us and we take it to your competitors. And I said, that's fine if you want my competitors to sell second-class product, but I don't want to do it. I want to take care of the customers as if it were for myself. And so we open up every guitar that's more than $400, and we go through a whole thing. And again, 1,000 guitars a day. There's a whole team of men and women that are doing this, but it really does make the instruments just be in a better position when they get them.
Well, it makes your customer sat scores, just off the charts, right?
But we do that with a lot of things, not just guitars, but we offer a 2-year warranty on everything we sell. I always thought it was ridiculous that something would break in month 13 or 14, and then you tell the customer it's their problem. Most failures are either infantile failure right away, they're under
right.
warranty, or they last a long time. And I just didn't think there was much difference between 12, 13, 14 months. And so we immediately did at least a 2-year or 24-month warranty.
So if the manufacturer's warranting it for 90 days or a year or whatever, you're taking it 2 years.
But it just happens so
right.
seldom, and
yes.
yet it makes the customer feel so
Absolutely.
much better. We have technical support on everything we sell. A lot of the manufacturers know their products well, but they don't know how their product interfaces with another brand, and that's a big thing today. And so we have probably 35, 40 people that are just doing free technical support all day long, making sure your products work with each other.
You have it's called something alley or corridor in your facility where you have all the different manufacturers.
Oh, you mean by the slide?
No, well, there's the slide, but yeah, up there in that space where there's all the different. There's
the
various
manufacturer vendors that are there. Yes.
Yes.
So we do so much business with so many vendors today that they figured out. We'll provide the office and maybe the telephone, but they'll provide the employee and
yes.
have them in our building. It's a model, frankly, that I borrowed from the cosmetic industry. If you walk into Macy's or any of the big department stores, quite often the employees there are the employees of the.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They have the
so at the makeup desk or whatever, those are Maybelline's employees.
Absolutely. And so we do the same thing. And so there's probably 50 or so employees of other companies that are in our building. But if I have a question about your particular product, I can literally go ask that person. Or if I want to know about availability and we can't get it through our normal channels, they can go through the back channels and find out what the real availability is. On and on. It's been a fabulous thing because each one of those manufacturers reps develops relationships with
yes.
our people. So
yes.
our people tend to sell more of their products.
Yes. All right. So I love it. So now I want to go backwards in a minute too to pick out another anecdote, but I love this. So from a customer satisfaction standpoint, customer service, the risk is so low to have a 2-year warranty. And so, but from a customer experience standpoint, I'm absolutely going to buy from Sweetwater.
I hope so.
Right. If I'm buying whatever, by the way, I bought all kinds of stuff from Sweetwater over the years on recording equipment, et cetera. But like that makes so much sense, right? By going the extra mile, the downside's very low. Well, so what? In the upside is massive, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of repeat customers, word of mouth.
Another example of that, I empower all of our employees to do whatever it takes to make the customer happy. Now, customers aren't always right.
Right.
Customers are always customers, though. Yeah. And maybe there's a small percent that'll take advantage of us once in a while. But I always tell our employees, I don't care whether you're the people doing cleaning of our building or the receptionist, if you need to do something for the customer, just do it.
Yes.
You will never come into our company and go, I need management approval, or it
right.
just does not happen. And so if our receptionists feel they want to replace a keyboard, they replace a keyboard. If they want to replace a guitar, they replace a guitar. all that's going to do is just make the customer thrilled with us. We're going to take that guitar or that keyboard, we will clean it up, we'll fix whatever problem it may have, and we'll turn around and sell it as used or demo,
Right.
and the next customer gets a deal, so they feel great. So it's really not...
Everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy. It's an easy thing for me, and we don't have to talk to the manager, quote unquote.
Right. So back in the day, when you start carrying these other products, what was the experience for customers back then? How did they go buy a microphone or go buy an amp, or like what was that experience that you were displacing when you first started to get into that piece of the business?
Yeah, so understand this is long before we were comfortable ordering online from Amazon and other places. But what we had built was credibility with our customers. And so I could say, go ahead and buy it. If you get it this weekend, you don't like it for any reason, we will take it back. And people don't dislike stuff when they get it in their home or in their studio and start using it. And the few times that it comes back, again, that's great. I just turn around and sell it as a demo. Next person gets a little bit of a deal, and that just provided a level of comfort for our customers.
Yeah. So as you think about the business as you grew it, the customer's in the center of the business.
Always.
100%. Love that. So then as you start growing the business, there's no doubt these inflection points, right? So you start in your, by the way, did you say you lived in a trailer?
I lived in a 12 by 55 mobile home for several years, yes.
That is awesome.
I started with nothing.
I love it. That's awesome. So then you go to the 5,000 foot facility, right? You move, you go to the 5,000 foot facility, and you go to 40,000 feet. And today you're at 1 million, you said?
Just under 1 million square feet.
Just under 1 million, roughly. So what are some of the big pivot points that you recall in growing your business where maybe, did you bootstrap it all the way? Did you take investors early on?
No, bootstrapped.
All bootstrapped.
Yeah.
So how did you navigate some of these inflection points where you had to make that investment to jump from 5,000 to 40,000, and maybe your EBITDA wasn't at a level where the banks were 100% comfortable yet with you as a business because of how old the business was, et cetera? What are some of the things that you did to manage through that?
Well, if I go back to the beginning, I remember very clearly trying to get support from the lawyer, from the accountant, from the banks, and they would just scoff at me. A recording studio in Fort Wayne, you need to go to Nashville, you need to go to New York, LA.
Yes.
They just couldn't even conceive the idea. And I'm sure I got frustrated at the time. I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure I got frustrated. But when I look back now, it's probably a little bit arrogant on my part. They didn't understand. I'm not sure I understood my dreams and aspirations, but it clearly wasn't a language they understood. And so to expect them to support me in those early days, it was foreign to them. It was really foreign to them, just like speaking French would be to me today.
Right.
And so, that was an inflection point to learn, no matter what they said, you'd listen to them, you took some of their advice, but you had to have a drive and a passion that anything was possible, and failure's not an option. Failure is just not an option. And so, in the early days, my credit cards were maxed out. I had a second mortgage on my home and all of those things. Eventually, they got paid off. And, the more years I was in business, the more I had confidence in myself and could go with what I call my gut.
That's a real thing, by the way.
I don't doubt it at all.
Physiologically, I used to think that going by your gut, but like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I read something that's a real phenomenon that physiologically your gut is usually right.
And I'm confident the more years that I've been successful, my gut and my head can get there quicker and quicker. Unlike a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, I didn't go to college. That's not to say I'm uneducated. I've learned in a lot of other ways. I've taught myself everything in the business. And, but clearly using my gut is a reaction that I can use really quickly, and I don't have to analyze things very long. As for other inflection points, it was just people not understanding my business. That was probably the hardest thing. But we were fortunate. We just kept growing. Today the company's 46 years old, and we've never had a year where we've lost money. In fact, every year that it's grown. And so that's a pretty amazing thing. I remember very clearly one of the big inflection points. So I was on the board of directors of a local bank that was publicly traded back in 2008, 9, 10 during that recession. And we were calling a lot of the loans due. The federal people were telling us that we had too much money invested in various real estate things and all that. I very ceremoniously came back to our company. At that time, we had 225 employees. I brought them all into the theater that we had, and I said, as arrogant as this sounds, I'm choosing to not participate in this recession. I don't want you to worry about looking for another job. If you remember at that time, General Motors had filed bankruptcy. A lot of companies were really struggling. I said, I don't want you looking over your shoulder for a new job. Let's just buckle down and do what we do really well. Take care of the customers. If we take care of the customers, they will take care of us. During that next year, we did a lot of interesting things in the company. We went from a paper-based company to completely paperless. We dropped a couple brands that were a lot of energy, but not necessarily brought a lot of profits in.
Right.
But more importantly, we took on a lot of brands. We started selling drums, which we had never sold before. We started hiring people. A lot of people had been laid off, and so it was a great opportunity to find great talent. And so we brought talent on, and so when that recession was over, we were hitting the road really hard and doing really well. But those were a couple of the points.
I love what you just said. I'm choosing not to participate in the recession. I have a friend that has a business in the construction industry, and as we know, when we go through these moments in time, it hits certain industries really hard. And he's always had that same attitude, that same mindset. And by buckling down, getting super efficient, driving the imperfections out of the business, like taking those opportunities just to get more efficient, and then the other companies that kind of hunker down. Then those best people tend to go to who's not hunkering down, and before you know it, your story is like many small steps equal giant leaps.
Absolutely. I give a lot of that to being a Boy Scout. Boy Scouts aren't as popular today as they were when I was a kid, but the Scout law says that a Boy Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, clean, brave, and reverent. Amazing principles to live by personally, but I think they're amazing principles to run your businesses by.
100%.
Yeah.
We could use a lot more of those things these days.
I agree.
So, all right, so you grow this company, it's been highly successful. Then you decide to step back and you brought in private equity, right? What was that like? Was that hard?
Oh, it was really hard. And I still miss it every day. It's been almost 4 years, but I got to a point in my life, and frankly, what it really boiled down to is talking about estate taxes of all things.
Mm-hmm.
When my wife and I both died, we would have to give up nearly 50% of the business. And I had invested all the money back into the business. That's one of the reasons it grew so much. And so I didn't have, not that I'm hoping to die soon, but I didn't have the cash available that would have taken to pay the government off. And I was at a point where we brought in all kinds of experts to help us try and figure it out, and had great attorney and great accountants, and they brought in experts. What do you do? And what's the company worth? And I'm thinking the company's worth, I don't know, maybe $600, $700, $800 million. I was pretty naive, but still, that's a $300 or $400 million tax bill when the day comes. And I know you can pay the IRS over 10 years and all that, but it's still, after paying millions and millions of dollars of taxes, it's really painful to think about giving up nearly 50% of your business. And one day I flippantly said, after one of these awful meetings, I said, well, if this is going to happen, why don't we just sell the whole company now? And everybody looked at me like, are you serious? I said, I don't know. We're exploring everything. So this was the December of almost 4 years ago now, or a little over 4 years ago, and brought in 5 different firms to talk to, big ones, little ones. And I said, I don't even know if I'm going to go through with it. I don't need to. I don't owe the bank anything. We're making lots of money, but I'm just thinking how to plan, and I don't have children that really are going to take over the business and all that. And finally decided, after interviewing these 5 companies, to go with JP Morgan. And JP Morgan said, we will do the process, put a book together and all that sort of thing. And if in any way through the process you want to back out, that's fine. Just pay us for our production costs, but there's no transaction fee. Okay, fine. And so we put this book together, as they say, which described the business and pointed out the future, probabilities and all that sort of thing. And we sent it out at the very end of February. We sent 16 books out. And I'd already been clear that there were pillars that were really important to me. I wanted to stay in Fort Wayne. I want to continue to support the nonprofits like we support. You got to support our sales management and sales team, and really keep the same values and all that. And those are 5 pillars that I just wouldn't budge on. So if a company wanted to invest and keep those pillars in place, I'm interested to talk to them. So sent 16 books out, and there were 10 of them that I just knew weren't right for us. I knew their background, history, and all that sort of stuff, and narrowed it down to 6. And they interviewed us as hard as I interviewed them,
right?
Because I had nothing to lose.
Right.
I'd be happy to just keep. I loved what I did. I thought I would die at my desk. I really did. In the end, we boiled down to a company out of Providence, Rhode Island, called Providence, and they agreed to all those principles. They're good men and women, and I can fast forward today. It'll be 4 years in August, and they've done exactly what they said they've done. Now, in fairness, the company keeps growing, and we're hitting our plans and all that, so that makes it pretty easy. But I've been really thrilled with the process. I've missed it, being there day in and day out. I get over every week or two, and I'm still chairman of the board. And my wife and I still own a big piece of it. We just don't own the majority anymore.
Yeah. So now so since then, or maybe even started before that, you're a helicopter pilot.
I am a helicopter pilot.
How long have you been a helicopter pilot for?
I went to a little air show back, it's been 18 years ago now, and I saw somebody flying in their personal helicopter. I went to the guy, he was an engineer I knew, and I said, oh, this is so cool. And he says, you ought to do it. And I said, no, I'm 50. He said, oh, no, I've got a friend in his 60s that got his license. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. So I went home, started working on my wife. Everybody's always afraid. And that Christmas, she gave me an FA logbook and how to fly helicopters. And in January of that year, I started training. And by August, I had my license and had bought a brand new helicopter. And since I've flown all over the country, I've been to California, back twice. I take
in a helicopter?
In a helicopter.
Is it a jet copter? Or what's the right word for that?
It has a jet engine in it.
Yeah.
But it's still going about twice the speed of a car.
Yeah.
So it took about 16 hours to get out there. Actually, a little longer to get out, a little faster to get back. But landed on the Rocky Mountains at 12,500 feet and got out, walked around. It's just fascinating. I take one to Florida every winter. I've been out to the East Coast. I've been into Canada. I've been everywhere Northwest. I haven't been Northwest yet, but
that is amazing.
It's an amazing experience. I flew around the Gulf of Mexico a couple of years ago at 500 feet over the earth, and it's just unbelievable. Stuff you can't do in a swamp boat, you can't do in any other sort of thing you can do in a helicopter.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so you're flying every week. Did you fly down here today?
I wanted to, but the weather wasn't quite good enough.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so you start that hobby 20 years ago-ish, 18 years ago. But you've gotten into some other things.
Sure.
Right? So how do you decide what you get involved in and what you don't get involved in outside of the company?
My answer is probably different than my wife's answer. She would say, please slow down, but I just can't help myself. If I see an opportunity or a way to make things better or to help people, I'm all in. And fortunately, I have a very good team of people that help me do that. And there's just been a lot of great opportunities that have come to us through the years.
So from a nonprofit standpoint, what are some of your biggest passions that you're involved in right now? What's your focus
Boy,
on?
the one I'm most excited about is one we opened up last fall called Pearl Street Arts. It's an old 100-year-old building. It used to be a bakery, and we took 40,000 square feet of it, completely remodeled it, made it beautiful. There's 20 lesson rooms. There's a big 400-person rehearsal hall, concert space, a bunch of offices and that sort of thing. But what we did is we went first to Fort Wayne Community Schools, which is the largest school system in the state of Indiana, but also probably one of the most impoverished. And we said, we want to allow your students to take music lessons regardless of their family's ability to pay. And we were hoping for 150 kids. We had 502 sign up. We have about 450 that are coming through our building every week, and we're giving them music lessons or concerts and that sort of thing, again, regardless of their family's ability to pay. I think it will change what happens in Fort Wayne. You know, a lot of those kids think their only way out of Southeast Fort Wayne is NFL or NBA or I guess now WNBA. But music and arts is another way, and we're doing that. We also have an entrepreneurship class. There's a big program in Fort Wayne called AMP Lab, where our Fort Wayne Community Schools is in the Electric Works building, and we get 25 kids a day, and we're teaching them entrepreneurship and leadership and just how to develop themselves as youth. Next year, that grows to 50 kids, and so I'm really excited about that program.
The ripple effect of that's exponential.
Oh, it's incredible.
How big is Electric Works in Fort Wayne? How many feet? Do you know roughly?
I don't know how big. It's big. I don't know what it is, but it's big.
It might be one of the biggest in the country.
Yeah, it's big.
It is a major facility, and for any listeners, if you haven't been there, you've got to get to Electric Works in Fort Wayne. The things that are going on there are absolutely amazing. So what ideas do you have in a world that we live in today? So your story is many, many small steps equal giant leaps.
Sure.
Perseverance, blood, sweat, tears, grit.
You're reminding me of all those things, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Days where you're in a fetal position, nights where you're crippled in a fetal position with your wife. I don't know if we're going to make this. Don't know if we're going to make payroll tomorrow. Those moments had to have happened.
Failure is not an option. Anything's possible.
Just
But I
keep
will tell
going.
you, in those days, I was programming our database, our CRM, customer relationship management software. I was programming in the Kurzweil, and I never have done an illegal drug in my life. I've never smoked. I barely drink anything. But I could do 2 and 3 days of just that adrenaline going because it's so cool to get another feature in that CRM database or something.
So how do we, today we live in a world just filled with instant gratification.
Yep.
And like, what do you think about at night when you're laying in bed, about what life was like 50 years ago, starting the business, all the ebbs and flows, technology advancements, right, the onset of the smartphone, et cetera. Like, how do we, in essence, like, slow down? Like, how do we take one step back to take 3 steps forward as humans?
I don't know if we're going to be able to. I think we're all on this merry-go-round going really fast.
Yeah.
What I would also say, though, is when I started the company, there was no internet, there was no technology like that at all. I learned by going to the library, listening to records, reading books. Today, I think young people have such an incredible advantage with the tools that are instantly accessible to them. Now, there's also a lot of competition, but there's lots and lots of ways to advance and improve quickly, and even down to venture capital money. None of that was heard of when I started the company 40 plus years ago. So I'm actually enthused and excited for the opportunities for young folks today.
So back to instant gratification then. Like we took cursive handwriting out of schools. Now I'm kind of going off the reservation here a little bit, Chuck. I get very interested in these conversations when people have seen these ebbs and flows over many decades. But like in schools, we took out cursive writing. And as I understand it, I'm not an expert on cursive writing by any stretch. But as I understand it, that like really means something in terms of like brain development and helping the synapses connect. And I too believe, I agree with you, like AI, like we're going to see multimillionaires in high school, maybe junior high.
Absolutely.
Right? Maybe at 6 years old, right? And like social media, I think about social media tools. And like my son got his phone when he was in the 6th grade. And we were talking about this on a previous podcast. And like when they get handed this smart device that's how many X more powerful than the first like IBM computer, right? And they get exposed now all of a sudden to the good and the ugly, right, in the world. How do you think about that? I just wonder, like, how do we let kids be kids for a little while? Maybe still play with AI tools and build things if they want to, but don't like warp their minds too fast.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of that
is not possible.
I'd like to think it's possible, and I think a lot of it is, frankly, the supervision of parents and adults in their lives. I have a daughter that's a senior in high school. I'm so excited for her. She's had an iPhone in her hands since she was born, literally since she was born, and she's used it for the good. And she is so far advanced what I was and what other people my age. I think it's a great tool as long as it's used in a responsible sort of way. And I've been very blessed that she's not used it, as far as I know, in an irresponsible sort of way. But those tools are a challenge. And I did a speech a few years ago at the Boys and Girls Club, and I talked about some of the video games. And some of the things that are programmed in those video games are just horrific. Just horrific. And, but there's lots of temptations for young people today, and it's really how they grow up. I think the really bigger challenge, are the preschoolers. I'm really involved in early education in Fort Wayne, and I look at these little ones that come to kindergarten, and they don't know their colors, they don't know their shapes, depending on the neighborhood they grow up in and that sort of thing. And if they're not prepared to learn at kindergarten, they're not going to learn to read by 3. And if they don't learn to read by 3, they're not going to do math at 4 and 5, grades 4 and 5. They're going to be behind all the way through school. They're going to be behind all the way through life. And so we just have to invest in our little ones because, frankly, they're our future.
They're our future.
That's it.
100% agree, right? I say it to people all the time, like literally our children are our future. And getting them exposed to just opportunity, right? And showing them that, hey, here's an on-ramp, here's an on-ramp, here's an on-ramp. And I've always loved this phrase, like positivity breeds positivity.
Absolutely.
Right? And showing them a light and a guide and a path. I grew up on a small farm, right, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and in particle board floor, and we took a horse and buggy to church on Sundays.
Wow.
And so just curiosity. I love that word, curiosity. Help them be curious, and give them paths and tools to be curious.
It's so sad. I look at Fort Wayne, and I'm sure it's true across the whole country. There are parts of our community that are totally, have lots of things, resources and access and all that. But then there's a good part of our population where they've never been out of their neighborhood. They haven't been on an airplane. They haven't seen anything else. And so that's why I'm so involved with the Boys and Girls Club. I love showing these young kids that there are opportunities, there are things they can do. And it blows their mind that they just never had any idea. And we have a thing called the Jim Kelly Career Center in Fort Wayne, and we're teaching them that they can paint cars, they can do welding, they can do medical stuff, and their eyes are just wide open. They had no idea. And to hear these young people now say, I want to be a welder, I want to be an electrician, that's awesome.
These
or
are
go to
great
college,
Yeah, that's right. There's so many paths, right? Skilled professions are so critical, and the pay of those are incredible as well.
Great, yeah.
I know some situations where you can graduate from high school, go into like an apprenticeship in plumbing, let's say, or HVAC, and you're in that program for a year or two, and basically if you show up for work and you do the job, and there's not a lot of callbacks, and, if you're a rough-end person or a finished person or whatever it might be, then you become a team leader, a crew leader, which means you get the apprentice and a truck, and you can be making $250,000
It's amazing.
2 years out of college.
Yeah,
That's a pretty darn good career.
absolutely.
So, all right, well, we are approaching the end of the podcast here, but we have some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Now, there's no right or wrong answers to these questions. It might be about Sweetwater. It might be about
Sure.
being a pilot in a helicopter, or none of the above. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, and if you want to pass, we can pass, or pause. It's all good. So what is one thing in your industry? Now, you're involved in about 12 different industries, so I'm not sure which one you might pick. But what is one thing in your industry that you think people should stop doing?
I'm not sure it's in my industry, but I would say social in general.
Yeah.
It's just amazing when people don't know the facts, that they get on the internet and they have some opinion that usually is not based on the truth or any basis of that. And it's just not helpful. It's not. I wish we would all become more positive to help each other.
I love that, Chuck. That is more critical, I think, now, today than ever. Yeah. What is one thing, a process or a habit that you think leads to the best ability to disrupt or innovate?
I think, as long as it's grounded a little bit, I think following your dreams, following your gut. It's worked really, really well for me, and I don't mind disrupting if it's for the right reason. And so I have a philosophy. I always say, do the right thing. Do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, then you can disrupt. That's what it takes. That's what it takes.
I love that. Do the right thing and do it always.
Yep.
It's such a simple concept.
It goes back to Boy Scouts for me.
Yeah.
Trustworthy, loyal, helpful.
Yeah, I love that. If you could solve one problem in the world with innovation, what would that be?
Ooh. The problem is there's more than one problem to be solved.
There's a lot.
For sure. I wish, and I can't imagine, maybe we'll get there, but I can't imagine how innovation will do it. But I wish people could become more considerate of each other and love each other more. I could talk about famine, I could talk about medical stuff, but if everybody just tried to love each other a little bit more and understand each other a little bit more, that would go a long ways.
Yes. I love that. When you mention that, it makes me think of the word deference, right? Just like being deferential towards one another. And we don't know if somebody snaps or something. We don't know what happened to them this morning. They could have had some really bad health news of their parent.
Absolutely.
So who knows what happened, right? Yeah. And just giving people grace.
Absolutely.
So powerful. What's something that we haven't talked about today that you're passionate about? That we haven't touched on?
I would go back to what you just said. I talk a lot about mental health.
Yes.
We all have various degrees of mental health. Some of us are blessed a little more than others. But I would also say just giving back and helping others. You just don't know. You could be one medical incident, one accident, one thing away from being in a situation where you need that extra hand up or lift up. And I just wish we were all a little more kind, a little more considerate to each other.
I love that. Everybody has a background and experiences, right? And as humans, it's so easy to read the headline. Right. Kind of what you said a moment ago, right? Like read the headline and just, that person just had everything handed to them, or whatever the thought that goes through a human's mind. But like pretty much everybody has some kind of a story or experience, whether it's abuse or addiction or divorce or health crisis.
Absolutely.
Or something in their background, poverty, whatever it might be. And if we just took a few minutes, right, to like last year we kicked off Rally with this idea of vulnerability. Some people perceive vulnerability as like weakness. And I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just get real with each other, right? If you share like, well, here's some experience. There's a group out there called Entrepreneurship Organization and like YPO. You might have heard of it. Sure. And what I always love about that is in those monthly meetings, you're with a peer group set, and but you focus on the 5% best and worst in life, personal, family, business, and it's all confidential. Nothing leaves that room, and you get real with each other. I think it's like therapy.
I've spoken to a couple of those events, so I absolutely know. Yeah. We have an organization in town called Remedy Live, and one of the things that they coined and started speaking about a couple of years ago from a mental health point of view, when you ask somebody how you're doing, one more time, how are you really doing?
Right.
And just digging in a little bit more. It's very cool, very powerful.
Yeah, because the common response is great.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, how are you really doing?
That's what I always say. How you doing this morning? Great, doing
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Well, that's amazing, Chuck. Thank you so much for coming on Innovate or Evaporate. Your story is inspiring. It's fascinating. There's so many. It's an illustration of all the things that you read about or you hear about, but like you actually put it into practice, right? Many small steps, giant leaps, perseverance. Failure is not an option, right? And just one step at a time. Truly fascinating. So congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. And I respond to every email, so I would encourage anybody listening, if they want to reach out to me, it's Chuck@Surack, Surack.com, and I'll respond.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Chuck, you just heard it here, Chuck@Surack.com.
Yep.
That's Surack.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Chuck, for coming on. Congratulations again, and we'll see you all again soon on Innovate or Evaporate.